Hello. So a couple things. I'm doing this Hangout style, and I have posted the link, but I'm going to talk about these three things. If you come in before I finish, we're still going to go through these three things, but you can definitely take part that way. But this is sort of the agenda. Now, first of all, I'm going to start off with ideology for Kenneth Katona here. It's a very simple situation of why I reject all ideologies. Now, ideology used to mean ideologies used to probably, according to the well, here, I'll read the Stanford Encyclopedia on ideology here in the law and ideology section. Okay. Under liberal concepts of ideology. What is ideology? The term was likely coined by the French thinker Claude de Tracy. Great French, right? Okay, anyway, at the turn of the 19th century in his study of the Enlightenment, for de Tracy, ideology was the science of ideas and their origins. Ideology understands ideas to issue not haphazardly from mind or consciousness, but as the result of forces in the material environment that shape what people think. De Tracy believed his view of ideology could be put to progressive political purposes, since understanding the source of ideas might enable efforts on behalf of human progress. Ideology today is generally taken to mean not the science of ideas, but the ideas themselves, and moreover, ideas of a particular kind. Ideologies are ideas whose purpose is not epistemic, but political. Thus, an ideology consists to confirm a certain political viewpoint, serve the interests of certain people, or to perform a functional role in relation to social, economic, political, legal institutions. Daniel Bell dubbed ideology, quote, an action-oriented system of beliefs. And the fact that ideology is action-oriented indicates its role is not to render reality transparent, but to motivate people to do or not do certain things. Such a role may involve a process of justification that requires the obfuscation of reality. Nonetheless, Bell and other liberal sociologists do not assume any particular relation between ideology and the status quo. Some ideologies serve the status quo, others call for its reform or overthrow. Right. Now, my perspective is that ideology in this modern sense of the set of ideas is the product of a certain class of philosophy. So part of skepticism through Sextus Empiricus is the description of basically this meta-philosophical system, that there's three categories that you could put. All philosophies will fall into one of these three categories, and the philosophies in these categories don't agree with each other on other issues, but there is an issue that they're fundamentally agreeing on, whether they realize it or not. And actually, they most likely do find it possible to realize. And these classifications are that on the one hand, you have philosophies that believe they have ascertained the state of affairs, the reality. They have found true answers, final answers, the truth of how to look at something. Those are technically called dogmatists. Okay, they're the stuff that they agree on is dogma, and to me, an ideology is basically a synonym for a dogma. Ideas that are being pushed, that are being, other people should have these. These are just my ideas where I am, what appears to be the case at the moment. These are ideas other people should use. This is an end point. This is a final destination, right? Then there are people that say, nihilists, I would call them, that say that there's only one known thing, and that's that nothing is known or knowable. That nothing is actually the case, for example. Various ways of stating that. I believe it's somewhat of an impossible philosophy for a human or a living creature to hold. So it's simulated in those people, and that's their ideology. And then the skeptics are everybody else that doesn't do either of those two things. Skeptics, maybe something is the case. Our argument sounds to a lot of people like nothing is the case, but the real skeptical argument is just that human thoughts can't be exactly match reality. They're in our head and so forth. They're constructed in an embodied mind in order to help us behave and make decisions. They are not supposed to be absolutely accurate. Like if you look at the Mona Lisa, you could get a very good impression. You could have studied it better than anybody else on the planet and remember the most detail. and even be able to repaint something that looks to anybody else like the Mona Lisa, but you won't have memorized every speck of paint, certainly not every molecule, right? You don't need 100% accurate impression of the Mona Lisa to have one that's good enough. Like in the comment, I used an example to you of, if you're going to go to the moon and you're aiming for a particular location on the moon, but you're, 10 meters off, well, that's fine, assuming you have the location is smooth in a big enough area that you won't crash because of that. How accurate you need to be is depending on how big the landing site is, right? And so you don't have to think that I am going to hit at the exact point. I have every bit of knowledge about the Mona Lisa in order to have enough for your purposes to write a review or to make a flight plan. So in philosophy of these three categories, I'm a skeptic. Now, we can have a lot of disagreements, we skeptics. We have philosophies, we have worldviews, rather, that are what appears to be the case. Our best attempt at understanding aptly, the situation, environments, and being able to reproduce facts, and from our ideology, would match the facts, post-dict, predict, and all of that. But it's not an ideology because it's not an endpoint. We know there's a better perspective around the corner, right? And so having an ideology just gets in the way of looking for the better perspective that's always around the corner. And as a skeptic, of course, you could stay wherever in one spot as long as you want, but it doesn't have to become an ideology where like everybody should be in that spot, or that there's nothing further in theory to do. Now, all of us are moral. Eventually we will stop, pass away, and we will not go around some of the corners. And we get to decide how many we try to go around while we're here, and we'll eventually be stopped from going around further ones. And I'm not telling you have to keep going around corners. You could find a comfortable worldview and stop there, and that acts much like an ideology. It's a consistent set of ideas that you use to be comfortable in your life. That would be great for you. But it doesn't have to be like that means it's perfectly true. No, it's just apt for you in your situation, right? And add on top of this, people have these ideologies and like dogmas that are supposedly correct. But if you look at history, they evolve over time. They change just like our skeptical ideas do. Now ours, we admit they're going to change, and we focus on the methodology by which they change so that that can have some continuity to it. And ideally, one of perpetual incremental improvement, right? And that's fundamentally different than saying, a lot of dogmatists. Like I had a friend, he was a devout, Reagan Republican when he was young. Then he became a devout Maoist, and now he's a devout something else. It's like one dogma to the next. Doesn't want to admit he's actually a skeptic, going through ideas to improve them. And because he won't do that, he searches other people's ideas. He figures there might be an ideology out there that's at the 90% already to the end point. And maybe he could help it get to the end point, or whatever he's thinking. These are all things, motivations that can be expressed in a healthy way in skepticism, but in dogma, they're fundamentally an ideology. They're fundamentally dishonest, right? It's like, I'm going to improve this thing that can't be improved. So that's why I'm against ideology. It's not that the ideology, maybe there is a final best set of ideas. Humans will never find it, right? That I'm pretty sure. And if we do, we'll have to keep thinking about it to maintain it. I mean, thinking about it is putting energy into an idea. And you don't think about your correct ideas, then they fade away, fade out of power. We have a lot of that going on right now. And the other two things I wanted to talk about were, probably people will not get this. I'm sorry, you just do not seem very perceptive in general. And what I would really like is, whether you agree or not, try to give me some feedback on if you understand the idea. Because a lot of times people disagree, but they're disagreeing with some straw man or something that isn't what I proposed. And it's like, could you just slow down, understand the idea? Understand the idea, assuming you're going to disagree, fine, but be patient until you understand the idea, and then your disagreement will be more apt. And I think people just don't get it. They want to project in linkages between ideas that are just there for purely associational reasons. People happen to think this a bunch of this stuff. It's like libertarians that believe in building a wall between us and Mexico. It's like there's an inconsistency there, but people will assume you have the inconsistency and that you're in some club or ideology. So for example, in refugees, I'm going to talk about it this way. It's like, okay, I'm a Second Amendment liberal. I'm an American. I understand and to a certain degree support the argument that, yeah, some guns will get in the wrong hands. Somebody who certainly should not have been shot by any stretch of the imagination, unjustifiable shooting is going to happen because of that. But that banning guns isn't the only solution or necessarily the one we should go after. Banning guns probably could have stopped the Sandy Hook shooting because that guy didn't necessarily have friends and stuff to, you know, to go into the underground and get people to trust him enough to sell him illegal arms. Probably not. On the other hand, another way that could be solved is better mental health care and understanding in our country. In other words, I'm willing to take the risk of what happens with guns in the wrong hands instead of taking guns away. I mean, for example, we're going to have terrible weather as the climate change continues. And if we have an ice storm up here and get knocked off the power grid for a month and a half, if I have a gun, even a handgun, I can go shoot a deer or something and eat. Right? It's not a very likely thing to happen, but a gun is, when you're broke down to having to live off of nature, a gun is a big advantage, right? So it might be worth the risks, and there's other ways to mitigate those risks. Now, a lot of people that don't want the refugees in here, being conservatives, agree with me on the guns. Yeah, it's a terrible thing, those mental health situations that lead to this. We should do something about it. And well, it's the same with the refugees. Having refugees come, to me, is a boon. It's an American thing. I'm not doing it out of feeling like we ought to. It's a nice thing. How are we going to take care of them? No, we're not going to take care of them. They're going to work and be productive. And refugees are fine to take. I mean, granted, if a whole area is wiped out, like by a tsunami, and literally everybody's coming, that's still a positive situation for the people that accept them. Should be, can be. But you're kind of getting everything. In this case, no. Who do you think? Not everybody's fleeing, walking hundreds of miles on foot. Just some people. It's a disproportionate of those people are willing to do hard work to get into a safer environment. They're not going somewhere to make it like where they fucking came from. Now, yeah, maybe a few refugees or criminals slip in there. Well, a few criminals came over with the Irish immigrants, right? And to deny the racism inherent in this is just, you got to be more self-aware, because it's like, okay, there was this Republican recently that was talking about the Japanese internment camps of like, sometimes it's what you got to do. The Germans didn't get put in concentration camps in World War II in the United States. Just the Japanese. So it's not rational. It's not consistent. Okay. Now, in a refugee situation, a lot of those people that first know they need to get out are scientists and doctors and engineers. And the problem is your racism is keeping you from thinking that these refugees, you think they all live in a village or something, and they just have bones through their hair or something. No, they've got doctors and lawyers and engineers and stuff. And sometimes, you know, the situation gets so bad, those are the first ones that realize, I can't do my profession here. I won't be able to raise my kids to be one of these kinds of professions, and they want to leave. And so a few people slip through. That's just like the guns that get out into the wrong hands. We can handle it. There's ways to handle it, and we can handle it. And those refugees are a benefit, right? In this, we got so many rotten, spoiled, middle-classy, bourgeois, fucking unproductive people. They're just pissed off at this place, even though it's fucking rolling in resources. And that's not what immigrants are like. That's not what refugees are like. The refugees plus us already here, that's what makes the American spirit. Right? So, I mean, the Republicans have no difficulty finding immigrants to badmouth immigration because we did it legally and stuff. You know, rich immigrants. So, I mean, I was arguing that they were like, well, Islam is a criminal organization. just last night I was reading this code that was helping me do my web page. It was kind of like a business card. I'm a software engineer. So, and it looks, oh, woman's wearing a hijab. Yeah, no. Okay. Similarly, on the responsibility things related, but why take historic responsibility for a situation? Well, I think the main thing here, that's like 4 levels into an argument that, 4 levels ago, I think people just don't get. Again, your perception doesn't seem that great. In morality, most all of you focus on somebody else did something. Is it moral or immoral? Right? And you think in terms of law systems, when in reality, a law system is not for enforcing morality, not in a democracy. It's for enforcing a minimum standard of behavior, mostly so people can know what to expect from each other. Like if it's legal to hit pedestrians, and you have forewarning, don't go jaywalking when a car is coming, he's allowed to hit you, right? I would not want a system like that. But that's the main purpose, is so that the king or the government can just after the fact punish you for things they didn't like that weren't explicitly made. Theoretically, it might relate to certain kinds of ethics and standards, right? But it's different from morality. Most of you use a moral idea as, hey, Joe, you're being immoral. Here we go. No, I'm an individualist. I don't use it that way. I'm an individualist and a skeptic. You have to epistemologically distinguish between what you know as an individual and what you know of what other people know. So if I say, I know pretty well how I feel on this subject, Joe, and I say, I have a pretty good idea of your feelings on this subject, Joe. My knowledge of my own feelings and my knowledge of Joe's feelings, 2 totally different things, right? 2 totally different things. Okay. You can relate them because we're assuming there's multi-agency. But in the end, my knowledge of how I feel, it would be more accurate for me to say to Joe, Joe, I think I have a good idea of where you're coming from on this. Maybe I think I could put a statement up here that you would probably agree with, and as evidence that I understand the kind of results of your thinking, at least. But I can actually feel my thoughts and feelings on a subject, right? And I can only feel sounds and words and visions of his behavior from Joe, right? So a moral system is not about Joe's actions primarily. It can be applied that way, but you primarily apply it that way, and that's a mistake. A moral system is, like all philosophical systems, it's a part of a person's worldview, right? My moral system gives me advice, is a bunch of measures and yardsticks and various, cognitive instruments to help me decide what's right and wrong to do. Me, when I think of an action, what's right or wrong to do. So for example, I think it's wrong to steal, so I don't steal. I don't want to steal. I think it's a bad and counterproductive thing, right? In general. My moral question, if Joe steals from me, is not, did Joe do something immoral? Because my moral system is about me not stealing. If Joe steals from me, the moral question is, what can I do to Joe? What do I feel is right to do to Joe? Can I simply stop him from stealing? Can I go into his house and take that stuff back? Can I take extra things as punishment? Can I hit Joe? The moral question is still, it's always me. What is it moral for me to do? Joe does something that I think is immoral for me to do. The question is not, was it really immoral? The question is, what can I now do to Joe morally, according to me in my moral system? And I don't, Lily's quite excited there. Okay, well, let that be the dog whistle of endingness.